Which halves should you be jumping onto and which halves should you be ignoring? It's the question I'm getting all the time right now. It's the question I have the answer to. Welcome back, Longy here, casual athlete, previous overall champ, and here to give you my halves rankings for 2024. Let's get into it. So first up, this is the chart. It breaks down consistency versus upside based on 2024 player scores for this year. So only looks at this year, doesn't look at all the other factors that I'm going to bring into this as well. So it's a really simple interface that I've put together to show you who is scoring well and who isn't scoring well. So big thing to note here, and we're going to go into more depth on this, is you got Fogarty and Cleary right in that top section, Jerome Hughes and Dylan Brown sitting up there as well. And then you get into this section over here where there's a high upside score, but not a lot of consistency. So you've got Braden Trindle, Cam Munster, DCE, Sean Johnson. Shouldn't surprise you too much, especially with DCE, Sean Johnson, and Munster, because they're popping out those massive scores, but they do have those quieter games as well. We've got a section down here where it's more mid-ranger-ish. So Jerome Hughes with Munster back, Lachy, Galvin, Matt Burton. You've got Sam Walker a bit further down in the bottom section where there really isn't much upside. Jerome Luai, that is him with Nathan Cleary as opposed to without. And Cody Walker, that's him at halfback with Jack Whiten as well. So let's get right into it with the rankings here because I want to go into more depth and there are a lot more factors that go into this than just the upside and the consistency scores here. So Jamal Fogarty comes up first. Number one spot, 86 is his buy score. He's got a 93 consistency score, which is second behind Nathan Cleary. And he has the number one upside score with that first place. Now, what is driving this score with that first place is these numbers here. So when Jamal Fogarty, I'm going to call him Jerome. There's too many Jeromes in this list. When Jamal Fogarty enters the field, he is scoring 40 plus 100% of the time. He's scoring 50 plus 86% of the time. He's going 60 plus more than half the time. Now, that score there is what's contributing to the massive upside score because you're getting heaps of scores above 60 and you're getting 14% of his scores above 80 as well. So you're getting that massive upside, pretty strong consistency here too, and the ability to go 60 plus pretty routinely as he does put up those 60 to 70 scores quite a bit. So for him, 729K is a crazy price. I got to say, doing the numbers here, I've started to reassess my trades for this week. And I'm thinking maybe I need to go for Jamal Fogarty instead of a few of the other ideas I had instead. So he comes in 60.7 average. He's 8.7 points of value at that price as well. Very, very good option going forward. Now, the question I'm going to get asked here, and I know it's coming, it's a question I'm asking myself right now too, is Fogarty versus Cleary. What do we approach here? So Cleary comes in with a slightly higher average, 62 points, sorry. Just a big number. Buy score, 84, so slightly lower in that second place. He's got a 100 consistency score, so he's number one in consistency, whereas the upside number is number two with an 80 score for upside. So you're getting a bit of a different scoring profile here, and it is a smaller sample size for Cleary this year because he hasn't been on the pitch as much. But you've got scores above 50, 100% of the time. So that breeds the consistency score there. And then you've got scores above 60 quite a bit as well, but you're not getting that 80 plus boost. So if Cleary comes out, and maybe if last week, for example, he posted a 86 instead of a 76, which it looked like for a moment, he might have been first place in this ranking board. But right now, based on 2024 data, we're not getting any 80 plus scores. Saying that, we do know that Nathan Cleary is capable of that. So to me, I'm probably still targeting him over Fogarty myself. But there is also a few added risk components that have fed into this. So while Fogarty doesn't really have too many injury concerns, probably won't get rested, Canberra are fighting for that final spot, Nathan Cleary will almost certainly be rested in round 27. He may get rested again with this injury he has as well. And he does have some re-injury risk that Fogarty doesn't have as much of. So all of those things feed into the idea that Cleary might not be as strong as Fogarty for the run home. But then the narrative is that he is the best player in fantasy and you can captain him. So any of those big scores and that consistency, that is doubled in the captaincy position. So for me, if I was playing in a draft league where there was no captains, I might choose Fogarty for reliability. But when we have captains and we factor in the fact that, you'll have to captain someone else if you don't take Cleary, that's where he starts to become more attractive. So it really is a 1A, 1B situation with Fogarty and Cleary. It's your call which one you want. Cleary probably will burn you at some point down the stretch, whether it's that round 27 resting or something else. Whereas Fogarty's probably going to be safer, but he's not as high in pedigree as Nathan Cleary is. So it's your call to make. I'm okay with either option, but personally, I'm probably going Cleary myself. I might even get both. Saying that, this next guy here makes it really interesting. So Dylan Brown actually comes in third in this ranking list, and a few things breed into this. First thing is he's super durable, never really gets hurt. Second thing, the job security is fantastic. They don't have halves right now without Mitch Moses. So there's no younger and they're trying to develop in the halves position. Blaise Talungi might move into the halves at some point, but overall, I don't think he's going to lose his job. And thirdly, he's probably not going to get rested either. So Parramatta, they're fighting to avoid that wooden spoon. Parramatta have had a history of getting wooden spoons, so I think they want to avoid that altogether. So with Dylan Brown, you're getting pretty safe points each week. Now, in terms of his numbers here, it's a 58.5 average. This is running off no Mitch Moses games. That's the big thing to note here, that these are games without Moses. So 58.5 this year. You got 14 points of value, so he's priced at a 44, and you're getting a 58, which is absolutely crazy. The buy score is strong. It is a bit inflated due to those factors I just mentioned, but the fact that his consistency is number 3, so nearly a 90 in consistency, is massive, whereas the upside is limited, only 10th place in upside. There's a lot of higher upside options, and they're the guys on the graph originally we were looking at who are off to the left. I'm going to jump back to that graph in a second as well, but yeah, with Dylan Brown, you're getting very safe scores. So 100% of the time he's 40 plus, 80% of the time he's 50 plus, but then you're only getting 60 plus 33% of the time and 70 plus 22% of the time. Now, compare that 33% 60 plus to 40 for Cleary and 57 for Fogarty. You're not getting those big captainable scores from Dylan Brown, but 610K is a crazy price. So personally, I'm thinking I'm probably going to target 2 of these guys this week. Just the issue is I really want to get Isaiah Yeo as well. I already have Payne Haas. There's so many options right now, but these 3 players are super attractive, all for different reasons, but you could get on any of these 3 guys, and I think they're super trustworthy. Now, the 4th player off the ranks here, and I'm going to talk about Jerome Hughes in 2 lenses here, is Jerome Hughes. So buy score, 80.3. So 4th place in his buy score, and I've added decimals here because these do start getting quite close now. So 80.3 for his buy score. You've got a top 4 consistency, you have top 4 upside. You can see here with the numbers here, again, he's going 40 plus every week. He's going 50 plus 2/3 of the time. The plus here is he's going 60 plus more than half the time. Now, that is bonkers. And again, we go back to these previous numbers, 57, 40, 33, 56, right? So he's up there with Fogarty in terms of that 60 plus scoring, but then he doesn't have the 80 plus scores to back that up. 70 plus, he does enough of them, but you need a few of those 80 plus scores to really break the metrics in this thing. So upside score is limited at 67, but it is still quite strong in terms of that 60 to 70 scoring. Because if you look at this, 34%, so 1 in 3 games, he scores 60 to 70 points. Now, 77K is a good price, but the issue is this isn't the Jerome Hughes that we're buying, right? We're not buying Jerome Hughes up here. We're buying Jerome Hughes down here. So Jerome Hughes with Cam Munster sits in this spot where he's not with Dylan Brown, Jamal Fogarty, and Nathan Cleary. He's down with Lachy, Galvin, Matt Burton, these sorts of players instead. So you see the numbers change quite a bit where you've got that average go from 58 to 54. You have the buy score going from an 80 to a 74. Consistency goes from an 83 to a 70, and the upside drops from a 67 to a 53. So all of these numbers really drop off. You can see 40 plus, he starts going under 40, 20% of the time. He loses 7 points off his 50 plus score, loses a bunch off 60 plus. So instead of 56% of the time, it's 40% of the time. And he never goes 80 plus again. So those 70 plus scores stay about the same, predominantly because they are driven by more the running game. But the kicking game and the playmaking are what contribute to the consistency. So with Jerome Hughes, the perfect thing without Munster is that he is that primary playmaker. He gets all those really strong base stats, but he still has the big attacking upside. Whereas with Munster, he loses that base, still keeps the upside, but the base is what's carrying him to that consistent 60 plus, as opposed to a lot of those scores without the base moving to a 50 or a 40. So Jerome Hughes isn't someone I'm super interested in. He goes into the 7th spot. I've got him in my team, and I'm probably going to stick with him as a hold just because I've got other guys I want to sell more than Jerome Hughes. But I'm not super against if you do want to sell Jerome Hughes as well. It's totally up to you. It depends on your team. He does drop back quite a bit when Munster comes back. But keep in mind, he does play Parramatta this week, and with or without Munster, he probably scores a try in that game. Going through to Matt Burton, number 5. So Matty Burton, 75.3 buy score. He's actually ahead of Jerome Hughes with Munster, but he's behind Jerome Hughes without Munster. So consistency score and upside score are both in 8th place. So not crazy numbers to write home about. You've got a 52 average, so it really does start to drop off here. And you've got only going 50 plus 56% of the time. When you compare that to Fogarty, his 60 plus number is 56%, right? So with Matt Burton, you're taking the same struggle to get to 50 that Fogarty takes to get to 60, and they're at the same price. I'm a big fan of a pod, but I just don't think this one's worthwhile when Fogarty is so attractive at the price he's at. The tip you'd be making here is that Matt Burton goes on an absolute tear because he has had 2 big scores in a row, and that the doggies go for a big run home, push for that top 4 spot, and Matty Burton is a big part of that. So you're really betting on this number increasing, and he does have that 6%, so he has had that 80-plus game, but you're betting on that boosting up with a few more of those hat-trick games that Matt Burton absolutely can have. But it is really a subjective prediction based on real footy rather than the stats. So the stats say meh to Matt Burton, but if you want the narrative, I don't mind this as a pod either. Going through to DCE next. So DCE is another one who's very similar, very potty. DCE, and if we just jump back to the form chart here, you can see DCE is in this top line of upside players. So DCE, we'll talk about quite a few of these guys, but he has plenty of upside, just doesn't have the consistency of scores to back that up. So with DCE, you're getting 50 plus half the time. That's trash. That's really not good for your fantasy side to pay big money for a guy and only get 50 plus half the time. But the big thing here is 80 plus 13% of the time. That is unmatched. So if you can get this 60 plus number a bit higher, and I think that's the base of sharing with Luke Brooks that's really hurting him here. But if you got that a bit higher, then this 80 plus score would actually start to reflect in his upside numbers. So he is still 4th place in upside, but he could be so much higher if you had a more solid base like he used to have. So with DCE, if you're buying him, you're betting on that tear, right? So earlier in the year, he got quite cheap, and we all looked at him. We all thought, you know what, he's pedigree. Let's get onto him. He went on that run where he scored a couple of 80-point games in a row, I believe it was. I think it was 89 and a 78 or something like that. So he went on that tear for a short period of time. And then we hit the origin period. He cooled off. You're betting on that tear again. So you're betting on Manly being supernova, Turbo's back as well. Betting on them being really hot and DCE being a massive part of the attack. That's the pick you're making here with DCE. And you're betting on that previous pedigree as well, because he is a guy who's gotten it done before. And he has been a 60-plus average in the past. So that's a bet you're making. I really want to highlight the consistency is not there this year, though. So 12th place in consistency is really average, but probably not worth a trade in my mind. But again, a guy like him, a guy like Matt Burton, one of these upside players, you can take a shot at them. And if they do pay off, then they pay off big, right? So DC at the back end of last year, talked to Rob, who came 3rd last year. I think he captained DC in the final round. DCE scored 100 points. So I look at this and I think, you know what, it's a bet you can make. It's not what I'm going to recommend on the data, but I'm super open to it if it has that chance of working, and it could absolutely pop off for you. One thing here too with DC is they do have a buy coming up pretty soon as well. So buy, I believe it's next week. Yeah, it is next week actually. Yeah. So yeah, round 22 buy. Probably wouldn't do it actually. that's probably the nail in the coffin. I'm probably not going to do it because Roosters this week as well. So I'm not recommending it, but if you do like it, maybe in 2 weeks' time you can do it. All right, Trindle up next. So 507K, good price point. Number 8 in terms of his buy score. He's got that spot while Nico Hines is out, which is basically the rest of the season. Consistency score is quite low, so 16th, and upside score is decent with that 4th upside score as well. Now, really small sample size for us here. So he's gone under 50 twice, and he had that one big game against the Tigers where he scored 75 points. So that just boosts his upside score, but I wouldn't read into that too much because it is a very small data set. I view him as a capped 50 sort of average guy who is going to have some quiet games in there as well. So for me, that 53.3 average is probably about right. But I think that this will start to normalize and he'll increase this number here. So more 50-ish games and probably decrease this number. I think a lot less 70-point games. The thing that plays into Trindle's favor, though, is that the Sharks do have an awesome run home. So when you're looking at the Sharks, good fixtures coming up. He's the primary playmaker. They've got a good forward pack. They've got very explosive backs. There's going to be a lot of attacking opportunities. So you are going to rely on a bit of an attacking run for him or Atkinson as well. But if you really believe in the Sharks going on a tear without Nico Hines, then this is a shot you can take. The other thing here is he's 507K. So as much as I like Dylan Brown a lot more, that price point's pretty attractive too if you do need a guy around that price and you're short on cash, or maybe you're a head-to-head coach and you want that depth piece instead. Going through to Lachy Galvin, and we did skip past Ben Hunt, by the way, who is 7th place, but no one's buying Ben Hunt. So I'll talk about him when we get to the final graph too. Lachy Galvin's really interesting. So he's at a 67 buy score, number 9. Consistency and upside are quite limited for Lachy Galvin. So you're going under 50 more than half the time with Lachy Galvin. As much as we love him, he scored 70 last week, all that sort of thing. He's not a guy I'd be targeting with a buy, but he's also probably not a guy I'd be selling necessarily either. Now, the big thing this highlights to me is if you're a coach and you own Lachy Galvin and Jerome Hughes, it probably says to me that you shouldn't be talking about selling Jerome Hughes. You should be talking about selling Lachy Galvin if you're going to be selling one of those guys. Now, Hughes is about 60, 70K more expensive than Galvin, but he's number 7 in this ranking list. He has a lot more upside. The Storm are super hot down the stretch. Risk of around 27 resting is definitely there. But overall, I think Hughes is the guy I'd hold and Galvin's one I'd sell if I was going to sell one of my halves. Now, I'm not recommending selling either. I think Galvin is good enough to be a pseudo keeper down the stretch, 52 average. He's going 50 plus enough at the time. He's always going 40 plus pretty much. So you've got decent enough scores from Galvin, but I've got him behind Jerome Hughes with Munster and well behind Jerome Hughes without Munster. So for me, Galvin's probably one that you could let go if you were really desperate to, as opposed to a Jerome Hughes. And then just going through this list again. So that's where Galvin sits, right? So you can see him right in the middle. It's pretty good. Trindle has a bit more upside just based on these recent stats. I want to talk about Munster as well. So Munster, when he comes back, probably more of a draft league play. You're not going to buy him for your real league, but he's got a decent enough consistency score with pretty elite upside. So that's pretty exciting. Sean Johnson actually has really good numbers, even though he's been hurt quite a bit this year. That injury is going to take its toll. So he's actually quite low on my buy score stats, but in terms of just the raw numbers, just the stats, I do want to highlight that his upside and consistency has been decent this year, even with those bad games, which I did leave in there as long as he played 60 plus minutes. Adam Reynolds is interesting as well. So he's number 5 in consistency. He's a guy who averages 50 to 53 basically every year. Doesn't have the big upside, so hasn't been scoring huge, but could be an option you consider. He's about 634K, dropped from 689K last week. He's going to get into the 500s, and he's a guy that could be interesting as well. Tamari Martin, Ben Hart, not super interested. We talked about Burton going on a tear. Sammy Walker over here. So a lot of you guys are asking about holding or selling Sam Walker. I think it's a sell. The Roosters have a bye in 2 weeks' time as well. So I think he's a sell. Just the consistency and upside both aren't there. With him, you want to have a few more of those massive games, right? So if you're getting Sam Walker, you want him to be popping off for 80, 90 points every now and then to put off that fact that he scores, 30, 35 points every now and then too. And then Hastings, people have been talking about him, very low upside, good consistency, but never really goes 60 plus. Cody Walker. Cody Walker, he is interesting. So him at halfback, very small sample size, about 6 games, next to Jack Whiten. His upside is really low, so he's not cracking 60 plus much at all, but he is pretty consistent. He's scoring decently enough. Jack Whiten is taking a lot of those big attacking plays, and Latrell Mitchell, when he was fit, was taking a lot of those plays too. And then Jerome Luai, I do want to talk about him as well. So I think Luai is going to be interesting next year at the Tigers, but for this year, next to Cleary, the numbers are really low. So consistency's not there, upside's not there. He's sort of a 30s scorer when he plays next to Cleary. You could argue that he's going to take on more of the kicking and all this other stuff. People are talking about that, but I just don't really see it happening. I think Luai is probably going to take his regular role next to Cleary. He's a very creative attacking player, but he doesn't take any of those base stats from Cleary, and there are still attacking stats for Cleary to have as well. So for me, I'm avoiding Luai pretty heavily. And if you have Luai, I'd be selling Luai very, very, very soon. So to sum it up, targeting Fogarty, Cleary, 100%. Holding Hughes, I think Hughes is a bit of a hold because even this here isn't too bad, right? And he's not that expensive. And the upside is that Munster maybe, misses a few games here and there, and he goes back to his regular self. So I'd be holding Hughes. I'm not super inspired, but I wouldn't be buying him, but I'm holding on to him. Dylan Brown at 610K is crazy value, very consistent, not heaps of upside. And then you can take a shot at a few other guys. So you can take a shot at DCE, take a shot at Munster, you can take a shot at Trindle. You could have a crack at like Matty Burton as well. I think you hold on to Galvin most likely, but those numbers are a bit less impressive. And then I'm probably avoiding this lower section with maybe the exception of Adam Reynolds if you're really desperate for a scorer down the stretch. All right, that is us done and dusted. Fantasy rankings for the half position. Hopefully you found it useful. Hopefully it reaffirmed a few things you were thinking or taught you something new. I actually find myself changing my mind when I make these videos too. So guys, make sure you do jump into our Discord channel. It is in the link in the description here. Also, if you want a fantasy championship ring, that's in the link as well. Fantasy championship rings if you've won your league. And other than that, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all that sort of thing. And I'll see you guys on the next video.